Every single week, you're always trying to improve your team. You're trying to see where I can grow, where are my weaknesses. And today I'm bringing you 5 players that you should be trading for before week 4 of the fantasy football season. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it with my first buy high player, somebody that you might have to pay a pretty penny if you're trying to acquire him. That is Alvin Kamara. Obviously, Alvin Kamara is coming off that 3-game suspension coming into the season. He is activated onto this week. He is playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who he has a great history with, okay? But before we even get to that, let's get into what we've seen for the New Orleans Saints so far. The Saints are currently bottom 12th in the league in rushing yards. And what's crazy, the rushing leader is not even a quarterback. It's not Jamal Williams. It's not Kendre Miller. It's not Tony Jones. It's not even Derek Carr. It is Taysom Hill, the gadget guy himself, coming in, leading this backfield in rushing yards coming into week 4. And if that doesn't screen opportunity for Alvin Kamara coming into week 4, I don't know what does, right? I mean, this team is clearly struggling. They are missing that run game opportunity for their team to really create some room for this offense to really operate as they move down the field. Look, Jamal Williams is going to be on IR for the next 4 weeks. He's going to be the next 3 games. Obviously, he was on IR last week. And they gave Kendre Miller, they didn't give Kendre Miller the full opportunity going into week 3. And when he got that chance, he really didn't take the opportunity. When he had the ball in his hand, didn't have the best opportunity either. Tony Jones actually outsnapped him in week 3, who was just elevated from the practice squad only days before, ever since Jamal Williams went on IR. And you can see a graphic on your screen here of the snap percentages, the carries, and targets that Tony Jones versus Kendre Miller has got in week 3. And I'm not necessarily worried about Kendre Miller or Tony Jones taking away opportunity from Alvin Kamara in the future, okay? And even when Jamal Williams does come back, depending on how Alvin is doing, right? I mean, obviously it's all dependent on how he's going to perform for the next 3-4 weeks. I'm not worried about Jamal Williams either. We also have to remember what Alvin Kamara has done, right? Look, we have to remember how efficient he has been, specifically in the air. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, he didn't do too well last year. I understand. But what we know in the history of Alvin Kamara, for literally his whole career, he has been a target monster, somebody that has been targeted multiple times, has been leading the league, not leading the league, but has been a top 5 running back outside of 1 year, including his rookie year, in targets. You can probably see the graphics on the screen. Since 2017, he has finished as in the top 5 in targets amongst running backs outside of 1 year, and that was in 2021, where he finished as he was 6th in targets when you look at it coming into that year. So if you are looking for a running back, if you are maybe trying to pivot off somebody that maybe you're trying to sell high, whatever the case may be, here are some following players I'm trying to trade away to acquire Alvin Kamara right now, okay? Zach Moss, we all seen how great Zach Moss has been. 30 attempts on the ground. What's going to happen when JT comes back? People are winning now and maybe saying, hey, you know, or people are maybe, let's say, in a weird area where they want to keep Zach Moss or want to sell Zach Moss high, whatever the case may be. If I can sell Zach Moss and acquire Alvin Kamara, I'm doing that every single day. Jerome Ford, Brian Robinson, Alexander Madison. Maybe you have to throw something more into that. Same thing with Rashad White. And what about Tutu Atwell in the wide receiver room, who has been phenomenal so far, averaging over 8 targets per game right now. Nico Collins, who's also been pretty great. Hollywood Brown and Garrett Wilson. That may be a little bit of a controversial name because obviously we all expect him to have a better, longer lasting season whenever they switch that quarterback. So Alvin Kamara is my first player that I'm trying to acquire in a trade before he really starts to pop off. And you may have to pay a pretty penny. All right, let's go to my next buy low person here, and that is a quarterback at the quarterback position I'm really excited about. That is Trevor Lawrence. Okay, so far had over 100 attempts, over 64% completion rate, just over 700 yards, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He is QB 20 on the year. Look, I would agree the expectation so far hasn't been what we expected, right? Very underwhelming, no doubt about it. But we have to understand all the context from every single game for the last 3 weeks and why he's been struggling for those 3 weeks, okay? So you can see the graphic on your screen here. Trevor Lawrence for weeks 1 to 3, over 21 fantasy points a week 1, QB 8 versus the Colts. Week 2, under 10 fantasy points, QB 32 versus the Chiefs. And week 3, just over 17 fantasy points, QB 18 versus the Texans. So let's break down each and every game and what's that context, what's been happening in these games, because I have been somebody, and maybe you haven't, maybe, you know, you haven't been able to watch every single game, but what is the context of that and why has Trevor Lawrence been struggling? In week 1, obviously had a great game, looked like Trevor Lawrence. He came out, he looked like he did his thing. He was a top 8 quarterback that week. In week 2, he played the Chiefs, who currently have a great defense, currently give the 7th fewest points to the quarterback position, and clearly their defense is better than what we expected coming into the season. Also, in those first 3 weeks, the Chiefs have allowed the 4th fewest points to opposing teams. So it was hard to score in those games, regardless, no matter what team you were going against. But not only that, even though they were struggling, you have to look at that context of what happened in that game. There were also 4 touchdowns that were turned over because either Calvin Ridley or Zay Jones couldn't get a second foot down while they were in the end zone. There was a point in time where they were driving the ball down the field. They were going back and forth a little bit. They just couldn't convert in the red zone when they were getting those touchdowns. So many things happened, and which completely changed Trevor Lawrence's outlook. 4 touchdowns that game, if they would have caught that, both foots was down, that's a whole different conversation. He probably would have arguably been a top 5 quarterback in week 2 if that would have happened, okay? Week 3, Calvin Ridley was banged up, was very inconsistent. He was in and out of games, right? Zay Jones also missed week 3. Not only that, the wide receivers didn't help. Calvin Ridley dropped a lot of balls. Not saying that it was on Calvin Ridley alone. Trevor Lawrence obviously probably definitely didn't put it in the right place at times. You know, underthrew him, overthrew him, threw a little bit behind. That connection just wasn't there for Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley going into week 3. So I'm a little bit saying, you know what, you have to give him a pass. It was a bad game. It was a bad game, right? And you have to understand, like, this team is a high-powered offense. They're currently 8 amongst quarterbacks or Trevor Lawrence is currently 8 amongst quarterbacks in passing attempts. So he's getting the ball out of his hands. They are throwing the ball consistently and often, which I like. Top 10 right now, once again, amongst quarterbacks and attempts in the air. So if you aren't a quarterback, obviously this is more catered to a super flex league. And sometimes in one quarterback league, depending on who you want. Maybe you want to pivot to a Trevor Lawrence if you have these other guys. Here are players that I will be trading away to acquire Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, in the quarterback room specifically, Brock Purdy. He's been playing great, but I think there's going to be some struggles along the lines. Jordan Love as well. That one may be a little bit controversial because he is a top 3 quarterback, top 5 quarterback right now in the year. Can you trade away Jordan Love and acquire Trevor Lawrence? Maybe can you get a little bit more in return? I would say a Baker Mayfield. I'll throw his name in there. He's been all right. Let's see what can happen in Superflex League. Russell Wilson. I think he's also a top 12 quarterback currently so far. Justin Fields, who's been struggling. Maybe they like the rushing upside with Justin Fields right now compared to Trevor Lawrence, right? What about a Kirk Cousins, who's currently QB1 in the season? He might continue that, or he might have that Kirk Cousins game. What about a rookie in CJ Stroud? I love CJ Stroud. He was one of my guys coming into this season. I understand if you want to trade away, or if you don't want to trade him away. But look, he's going to have his struggles again. But I will be trading CJ Stroud and relying on Trevor Lawrence and that history that we saw this past year and that we saw in 2022. So that is a couple of names. Those are things I would do. Players that I'll be buying to try to acquire Trevor Lawrence if I could. All right, let's go to my next buy low here. A wide receiver that I'm really excited for. This one's my favorite buys so far. I think this one may be a little bit obvious, but a lot of people are panicking on this person, and I would say this offense. That is T. Higgins. I'm still rocking with T. I'm still rocking with Joe Burrow. There's a lot of people, I don't think they can get past what Joe Burrow has done with this calf injury, right? I understand the calf injury is a concern because if he re-aggravates that calf, he could be missing 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even longer. I understand, but this is more of a longer play. This is a second half type of season play where hypothetically you're 3-0 and you want to acquire T. Higgins. You can do that right now. Maybe if you're 1-2, it's a little bit of a risk. I can understand. Or if you're 0-3, that's also a risk. But T. Higgins, we all know what he can do, and we all know he has the highest paying quarterback throwing the ball to him who has been successful and consistently producing fantasy relevant wide receivers week in and week out. Okay, very similar to what happened with, Trevor Lawrence. What is the context of that? Why has he been struggling? What has happened to T. Higgins? So you can see on your screen, T. Higgins, week 1, dropped a goose egg, right? Versus the Browns. What was that context? We'll get into it. Week 2, wide receiver 4. He looked like the old T. Higgins. Makes sense. Looked like the old Joe Burrow. It makes sense versus that loss to the Ravens. In week 3, this past week, on Monday night, we'll get into it with the context. On wide receiver 84, didn't even have 5 fantasy points coming into the week. So let's break it down and really understand what that really meant and why he struggled here, okay? Week 1 against the Browns, it was a terrible weather game. Kind of like we saw with so many games in week 1, really skewed the fantasy season, right? Had a little hiccups throughout the game, but he had 8 targets that game. He caught 0 targets or 0 catches, but he had 8 targets, which is absolutely crazy. Meaning they were trying to get the ball down to him. They were trying to get it down the field. They just couldn't because of the rain. And that's a game that I watched. We're playing the Cleveland Browns. Have a lot of stock in that game with T. Higgins, Elijah Moore, Joe Mixon, Joe Burrow. I mean, I have all those guys on my fantasy team, so I was really invested into that game. It was a bit disappointing for T, but I understand it was a weather game. Okay, week 2 went off. He was an OT Higgins. He led the team in targets. Everyone was expecting this team to have a massive bounce back. That was even with Joe Burrow limping off the field that re-aggravated his calf. They still got the loss, but T. Higgins, phenomenal game, scoring just under 30 fantasy points that week. And then week 3, no doubt T. Higgins had a massive disappointing game. Granted, not every ball was perfect. I would even say he caught 2 out of 8 targets. I would say 4 out of those 6 targets that were given to him, I looked back and watched it. T. Higgins dropped. He dropped 4 out of the 6 targets that he originally didn't catch at all. And that was completely his fault. That was just a bad game for T. Higgins. Now, if you're going to judge a person, which we've been seeing, I did a wide receiver video a couple days ago, and people were saying, why would you even start T. Higgins? He's terrible. He's been bad so far this year. People can't have bad games? Some of your best wide receiver can't have bad games. I mean, people do it all the time. Players do it all the time. Every single position has done it all the time. But now we're saying this player is bad. I don't understand the context. I don't understand the mindset behind it. I'm not worried about T. Higgins. I understand if you're worried about Joe Burrow. But if you are 3-0, maybe you're 2-1, and you feel confident in your team, this is a longer play. This is a play where you can get him in the playoffs, and this team is rolling. They're trying to push it for the playoffs. They're 1-2 right now, so they kind of save their season. I'm willing to acquire T. Higgins right now if I possibly can. So here are some players that I would trade away to acquire T. Higgins, which may sound crazy for some people, but hear me out, okay? First name right off the bat is Puka Nacua. Would you send Puka Nacua to acquire T. Higgins? A lot of people are questioning what happened when Cooper Kupp comes back. Is he still going to be efficient? He's going to be playing the Brandon Cooks role. I do believe T. Higgins still has a higher ceiling than Puka long term, but I understand if you don't want to do it. But can you get Puka plus somebody to acquire T. Higgins? Just a starting point, okay? What about a Michael Pittman who's been, honestly, we've been wrong about him. He's been getting the targets, but I don't think that will be efficient throughout the year. Tank Dell, a Nico Collins, a Jordan Addison, a Brandon Ayuk, a Jerome Ford, a Devon Achane. I mean, I don't know how we pronounce his name now, but a Devon Achane, if you are willing to trade him away, had a phenomenal week, only played 1 game, and he's RB5 on the year. I'm willing to sell Devon Achane to acquire T. Higgins and a Zach Moss, kind of like I mentioned earlier with these other players here. So hopefully that helps. Let me know, comment down below of any of those players that you like and if you're willing to acquire T. Higgins, and we can get to you. All right, let's go to I got 2 sell players left on this list that I think some people will understand, and some people will say, well, why are you selling one of these guys? Okay, so my first sell now player, and that is Alexander Madison, okay? RB19 on the year. Look, for most of you, this one may be pretty obvious, right? Unless you are a crazy Alexander Madison truther, you're probably saying, well, hold him. We kind of wait and see. Coming into the season, I wasn't a big Alexander Madison believer. I never believed or thought that he was going to be able to withstand and uphold this workload that Dalvin Cook left, all the attempts on the ground, all the opportunities in the air. Whether you saw him back in the day with when Dalvin went out and he was like, well, he's been great with those 6 games where Dalvin wasn't there. I just didn't believe that he was going to be there. I always thought they were going to bring in a Kareem Hunt, a Leonard Fournette. I never thought they were going to trade for a Cam Akers. Now, Cam Akers is in. This isn't a situation where I believe Cam Akers is going to take over this backfield. I do believe at some point in time in the second half of the season, this is going to be a 50-50 type of workload as the season progresses. Once Cam Akers, gets acclimated to this offense, understands the playbook, that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. So let's look at Madison's production so far this year, and let me tell you why there's a gap in the door right now where you can sell him for, I would say maybe still not high. He's not a sell high, he's a sell now, okay? So keep that in mind. So week 1 against Tampa, only 11 carries on the ground, caught 3 out of 4 targets. I mean, that is in total, if you think about it, the 15 opportunities on the ground, which is not exciting in total on the ground and in the air, right? Scored just over 13 fantasy points. That day was really saved by a touchdown that he scored on the goal line on week 1. Tampa, in week 2 against Philly, I think we kind of understood that Tampa was a better defense than we expected. Philly, we all expected him not to do so well. And then the Chargers. The Chargers right now currently give up the top, if I'm not mistaken, top 5 against running backs in the community right now. And I don't believe I want to be, looking. I don't believe I want to lean on that production that we saw just now from Alexander Madison to say, hey, I think this is okay. RB19 on the year. I think it's a very underwhelming opening of the season. Underwhelming opening, obviously week 1 and week 2. That's why I think week 3 there's a gap with that over 17 fantasy points that he scored that game. So here are some players that I'm willing to trade or try to acquire if I want to get rid of Alexander Madison. And some of these names may not be exciting to you, but I don't believe his value is going to get any higher. And honestly, I think it can get worse than some of these guys that we see right now on this list, because some of these guys may not be performing now, but I do believe the rest of the season they will be a better prospect, okay? Dameon Pierce just had a decent game this past week. I'm happy to trade for Dameon Pierce. What about a Javonte Williams, who I think if there is a time that you can trade for Javonte Williams, it might be this game, because he is playing the Bears, who currently give up, if I'm not mistaken, the 3rd most points to the running back position. David Montgomery, who's injured. I think that one might be a little bit difficult, but hey, try it. And Elijah Moore, he's been getting the targets, hasn't been getting the yards to get those points that we all home run expected. But the targets are there, which is exciting. He will definitely break out, in my opinion, with yardage coming soon, hopefully. Deontay Johnson, who's been on IR. Does this person need a running back? And you're okay with the wide receiver position. Can you receive Deontay Johnson? A Christian Kirk, with a lot of people thinking that Zay Jones, he is going to be the guy. I still rather have Christian Kirk. Terry, who's been struggling. Same thing with Jahan Dotson, who's been struggling with Sam Howell. They haven't been getting the ball to both of these guys, neither of these guys. So I'm willing to go there. And then Chris Godwin, who we all thought it was, not me specifically. There was a lot of people in the Vans community saying Chris Godwin is a great guy. He was going to be, if there's anyone Baker Mayfield could pepper, it was going to be Chris Godwin. Actually, it's Mike Evans, crazy enough. And as much as I'm not a Chris Godwin guy, I would rather have Chris Godwin over Alexander Madison long term. So that is a thought process there. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully you can understand where I'm coming from when it comes with Alexander Madison. And comment down below if any Alexander Madison trades you do have, because I'm willing to help you to try to get rid of him, because I don't think it's going to get any better once Cam Akers gets acclimated to this offense. All right, my last sell high player. I think this is where the controversy kind of comes in. And I kept this one for last because I really wanted you guys to understand maybe where I'm coming from and just everything that we've been seeing. And that is Raheem Mostert. RB1 on the season. Coming before week 1, Raheem Mostert was my sell high. And I'm still on that same boat of me selling Raheem Mostert, okay? My thought process coming in was that, okay, Raheem Mostert has a perfect opportunity to be the guy in the first couple weeks since Jeff Wilson went on IR. We also thought that Devon Achane was going to come in and take opportunities away, but he got injured in the first 2 weeks. So what we saw in week 3 is that Devon and Raheem was balling. They scored 70 points last time that happened since the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. And I think when you think about this, it's a bit skewed. It's not something that we should be expecting, especially with that production that we saw from Raheem Mostert coming into week 3. He scored 4 touchdowns that game. That's not something that is viable for someone like a Raheem Mostert. Now, one of my biggest arguments coming into the season, was that one of the reasons why I'm happy to sell Raheem is because I do believe the chances of him getting injured is significantly higher than anyone else out there. Because why? Raheem hasn't played a full season in his whole career. Right now, he's on pace to do that. I completely agree. And I'm not hoping and wishing an injury on a player. I'm not. I'm just saying, if I'm looking at the statistics, I'm looking at the history, I am betting on Raheem Mostert to get injured versus him not and playing a full season because of the information in the history that we've seen with his injury, okay? And the whole thought process here is, well, coming in that they were going to bring in somebody else, but now Devon has produced, which is great, and now Jeff Wilson is going to come back. Now, when Jeff Wilson does come back, I don't believe they're just going to have a 3-back rotation. I do think that if, once Jeff does come back, there is going to be, hey, we're going to gradually work you in. Maybe you get 10%, then 15, then 20, and then who gets more affected? Is it going to be Raheem or Devon because of how they're going to be producing? Now, this is purely based on what I can get right now. If you believe that Raheem Mostert can continue this RB1 production, kudos to you. I'm trying to cash in on the opportunity right now on players that I know have the history, that I know is going to be producing and have produced on a consistent basis in the past. The highest Raheem has ever finished as a running back in his career was RB24. Okay, that is not something that I want to lean on. But with the trade market, with the way the running back room is right now, can I trade Raheem Mostert, who is the RB1, for the following players that I personally rather lean on? And Aaron Jones, who we've seen finish as a top 10 running back multiple times. A Saquon Barkley, who is dealing with injury. He might miss week 4 again, and maybe going into week 5, right? If you are struggling at running backs, or if they're struggling, say, hey, I need a running back right now, I need to win. Can I get Raheem? I'm doing Saquon Barkley. What about a Travis Etienne? All this week, everyone in the comments, should I trade Travis Etienne away? Should I trade Travis Etienne away? Why? I mean, he hasn't been terrible. I would rather have Travis Etienne for the rest of the season than Raheem Mostert. What about a Josh Jacobs? I think you can get Josh Jacobs and more, in my opinion. Maybe that might be a little bit different based off name value, but I would rather have Josh Jacobs. And Austin Eckler, who we have no idea when he's coming back. We saw today, as I'm recording this video, he was limited in practice. Maybe we'll get more information. But if Austin Eckler misses this week, he has a bye in week 5. That player that has Austin Eckler probably needs to win immediately. Do you send them Raheem Mostert, a T. Higgins like I talked about, a Devonta Smith, an A.J. Brown, a Chris Olave, a Derrick Henry plus somebody else? I'd rather have Derrick Henry right now. I know he's been struggling, and I can get a 2-for-1 type of deal for Raheem Mostert. I'm doing that every single day, guys. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully all the information is there. Hopefully you can understand where I'm coming from. Comment down below with any questions that you have, any trade questions, any star sit questions, whatever you need, we'll answer it down below. Hopefully this was good information. And hey, before I let you go, flockfantasy.com/land, the best place to support what Zach and I are doing here. Zach is putting up 300 plus players that you can go and do your start sits every single week, helping you rank. He is ranking them. And not only that, you can get our fantasy hotline as well. Fantasy hotline, basically, you get a private chat with Zach and myself saying, hey, who should I start? Who should I sit? What do you think about this trade? So on and so forth, guys. So once again, comment down below. I hope you're enjoying the video. And as always, It's all up.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.